Zelensky is a puppet of the West, or Ukraine is a puppet of the West.
Sure.
That seems to go around a few times.
We had a big
Mm.
example of that yesterday, an account of an American lady who kept posting a message about, Ukrainian soldiers are getting
Right.
drug laced
Yeah.
food, and that's why they keep fighting, and that's why they keep winning. So basically, an excuse why the Russians are losing. Says, yeah, who is Ukraine is feeding people drugs? Who is doing that? Zelensky. And it was adorable because it was the exact same rant posted at like 20 different posts, and she posted it twice under my same post.
Yeah.
The issue is and on one hand, people start reporting it because humans actually do also report, and that is a
Right.
good thing. We should keep doing that to get rid of it. But some people will read it and go like, "Oh, whoa, they're using drugs," because that has also been a standard Moscow line. Like they're evil drug users. I mean, they should see my country, for Christ's sake. But that's just one example. And now the account is apparently already deleted. But the short term, the response time is way too slow. LinkedIn is releasing papers about we removed 4.4 million bot accounts. They said that in 2021. But they don't
Wow.
release any statistics about their total bot counts. So I don't know if 4 million is a lot or not. And the whole thing here is not that they removed the post the day after or the person the day after, but that during that day the misinformation was spread, and that person is probably we've seen guidebooks, Moscow guidebooks have been released by this.
Yeah.
That person is probably chugging vodka and manning 20 different accounts simultaneously.
Exactly.
So even if
Exactly.
we ban it within the day, that there is actually an access issue here in that people shouldn't be able to start posting as easily. I think I'm
Yeah.
just literally grabbing the example from yesterday here.
Right, right. So that example, I think, is more of sort of a bot generated example that will probably die out pretty soon because again, it's just not. It's going to be very difficult for it to be verified, and it's not going to come up in the conversation probably next month. But this idea of Zelensky being the puppet of the West, I think this is going to come up quite often. Nazis is kind of died down a little bit. There's now what it's a Satanism and what else? There's other things that Russia is defending. But then I think Zelensky question is going to be raised quite a lot of times, right? So let's maybe
Yeah,
talk a little bit about it. So here we have a guy that becomes obviously on the populist vote becomes a president, and he you know let me just give you my response to this, to how I would have responded to that. And that is, that Zelensky, just the way that he came along, I mean, he cannot be anybody's puppet because he wants such an overwhelming, support from people. He is a people's person. He's a populist, big time populist, that won the election in Ukraine by a huge majority, the 73%. I mean, you have to understand, we've never had such elections in Ukraine. It's always been like 50-50, 52 to 48, and it's never, but this guy just overwhelmingly wins. So it's not the result of the West or somebody, influencing. It's just the will of Ukrainian people. By the way, I did not vote for him. I'm still a Ukrainian citizen. I did not vote for him because I thought that he's not a professional, which he's not. He is a people's person. He is his profession was a comedian. He did run a successful business, so he's also an entrepreneur. So you cannot just tell him, he's a comedian. No, no, he actually, it's his business. He built this whole,
network.
company network, right? So basically, but again, he's not a professional politician. He's not an economist. So a lot of things that he made mistakes, throughout his career are because he's not a professional. But he's definitely not a somebody's else puppet because he just represents a typical Ukrainian. So that's the first thing that I would say. That's a very strong argument. Anybody who should be understanding that this was not a marginal person. It was a slam dunk he really represented the feel how people of Ukraine felt. The second thing that I would also say about, Zelensky being the puppet, I mean, of course, if he was a puppet, he would have probably fled Ukraine very early on in this war, because that's exactly what the West was trying to convince him. They were saying, hey, dude, most likely your country is going to be overrun. If you want to be saved, come to our country. We're going to protect him. But he actually went against that advice. He stayed in Kiev. He was very vocal. Look, give me ammo. Don't give me a ride. And that probably should again point out that this is okay. He's not really a puppet, because this guy is putting his life in danger. His life has been, at least 12 documented attempts of assassination, on his life. So again, that would be another point of evidence that, this guy is not being controlled by anyone. Now, is he reaching out to the West? Absolutely. I mean, who else can he reach? That's the first line of defense. We Ukrainians cannot stand in this fight by ourselves. We know that very well. If it wasn't for the Western military equipment, if it wasn't for England's help, if it wasn't for Netherlands, if it wasn't for the United States, we would not be able to fight this monster. And the reason that the Russian army is, disseminated today is because of the help of the West. So, of course, that's going to happen. Of course, those meetings, and he's going to be asking, he's going to be talking to the West, and it will appear as if he's working for the West, but he's working with the West for Ukraine. So those are the things that needs to be pointed out. Now, when the discussion comes, and this is very important, when the discussion then comes at the level, this is a proxy war, which is very often, this is where it goes through, and the point here that I always try to point out, that, the West is just using Ukraine as a puppet to achieve its objectives. I mean, look, this can end in a day if Russia just pulls out its military and it's done. The West is not going to attack Russia. Ukraine is not going to attack Russia. This is just silly, Even when NATO puts its, air defense systems on the Ukrainian border, again, they're not going to make the first step. They never wanted to. That it's all a source of propaganda. Just think about this. What is the ultimate, desire for the West? And that is to create a protection from Russia, which they've been right so far. Russia has been aggressively attacking these smaller countries, and now they actually picked the enemy that is formidable and that they cannot swallow. And now the West is actually helping them. So my point is, to bring up some strategic elements like this. So those are the line of conversations that I would go about in order to try to convince somebody that, it's this is just not the case. Maybe you guys can add to this, but it's just my thoughts.
If I may respond to this with 2 points, because you raised 2 very important points here. One is that indeed the propaganda lines have changed significantly over the last year. At the start, it was hardcore, good old Soviet-style propaganda of we're yelling something that is fake and saying it is real. Ukraine is all Nazis, there's going to be nukes, blah, blah, blah. And their air force is already gone. They're already in Kiev. The entire country is overtaking. The first few days of the war were insane in terms of propaganda, because they were just saying the country is already taken. And we moved to a way more subtle version where it's not hard misinformation, but more Goebbels style. So Goebbels from Nazi Germany, that guy knew his stuff, I'll admit. Which is the best kind of lie has a core of truth. Yes. So instead, they now spread misinformation about the level of corruption in Ukraine, about drug use stuff in Ukraine, about artillery explosions in Donetsk, some of which are true. It's the Russians blowing people up with ammunition and with artillery and then blaming Ukraine, which is more insidious, more dangerous to Western societies as a whole, because this is the stuff that has been infiltrating us for the better part of 2 decades. And this is just the Russian side. That's the most obvious one, but you ain't gonna convince me that China isn't doing the same.
Right.
And that is the real danger, in that,
Yes.
again, transparency of social media algorithms, as long as we don't have that, we don't know who's influencing our society, our elections, and our democracy.
Yeah.
Now, to your second point, which is that the whole war so far has been broadcasted online from day one, and that Ukraine and Zelenskyy, who is a media man, have been using that to an incredible extent to cover the war. And which is why, unlike Afghanistan, which I also covered, now I get to watch war crimes in HD. That's like the biggest difference.